think that even more amusing is our own acceptance that very far above this Earth's surface is a region that will be the subject of a whole new science, supergeography, with which we shall immortalize ourselves in the resentments of the schoolboys of the future. Pebbles and fragments of meteors and things from Mars and Jupiter and Azuria, wedges, delayed messages, cannonballs, bricks, nails, coal and coke and charcoal and offensive old cargoes. Things that coat in ice in some regions and things that get into areas so warm that they putrefy, or that there are all the climates of geography and supergeography. I shall have to accept that floating in the sky of this earth there often are fields of ice as extensive as those on the Arctic Ocean, volumes of water in which are many fishes and frogs, tracts of a land covered with caterpillars. Aviators of the future. They fly up and up, then they get out and walk. The fishing's good, the bait's right there. They find messages from other worlds, and within 3 weeks there's a big trade worked up in forged messages. Sometimes I shall write a guidebook to the Super Sargasso Sea for aviators, but just as a present there wouldn't be much call for it. And now have more of our expression upon hail as a commitment. Co-commitment. Now have more of our expression upon hail as a co-committant, or more data of things that have fallen from the sky with hail. In general, the expression is, these things may have been raised from some other part of the Earth's surface in whirlwinds, or may not have fallen and may have been upon the ground in the first place. But we were the hailstones found with them, raised from some other part of the earth's surface, or were the hailstones upon the ground in the first place. As I said before, this expression is meaningless as to a few instances. It is reasonable to think of some coincidence between the fall of hail and the fall of other things. But inasmuch as there have been a good many instances, we begin to suspect that this is not so much a book we're writing as a sanitarium for overworked coincidences. If not conceivably, could very large hailstones and lumps of ice form in this Earth's atmosphere, and so then had to come from external regions, and then other things in or accompanying very large hailstones and lumps of ice came from external regions, which worries us a little. We may be instantly translated to the positive absolute. Cosmos 13-20 quotes a Virginia newspaper that fishes said to have been catfishes, a foot long. Some of them had fallen in 1853 at Norfolk, Virginia, with hail. Vegetable debris, not only nuclear but frozen upon the surface of large hailstones at Toulouse, France, July 28, 1874. Description of a storm at Pontiac, Canada, July 11, 1864, in which it is said that it was not hailstones that fell, but pieces of ice from half an inch to over 2 inches in diameter. But the most extraordinary thing is that a respectable farmer of undoubted veracity says he picked up a piece of hail or ice in the center of which was a small green frog. Storm at Dubuque, Iowa, June 16, 1882, in which fell hailstones and pieces of ice. The foreman of the Novelty Iron Works of this city states in 2 large hailstones melted by him were found small living frogs. But the pieces of ice that fell upon this occasion had a peculiarity that indicates, though by as bizarre an indication as any we've had yet, they had been for a long time motionless or floating somewhere. We'll take that up soon. Living age 52-186. At June 30th, 1841, fishes, of which was 10 inches long, fell at Boston. That 8 days later, fishes and ice fell at Derby. In Tim's yearbook, 1842-275, it is said that at Derby the fishes had fallen in enormous numbers, from half an inch to 2 inches long and some considerably larger. In the Anthem, or Anthonymum, 1841-542, copied from the Sheffield Patriot, it is said that one of the fishes weighed 3 ounces. In several accounts, it is said that the fishes fell many small frogs and pieces of half-melted ice. We are told that the frogs and the fishes had been raised from some other part of the earth's surface in a whirlwind. No whirlwind specified. Nothing said as to what part of the earth's surface comes from ice. In the month of July, interests us that the ice is described as half-melted. In the London Times, July 15, 1841, it is said that the fishes were sticklebacks, that they had fallen with ice and small frogs, many of which had survived the fall. Gotta get sorry, I have trouble. This text is all pushed together, and there's a lot of commas, and it all looks the same, and I keep wanting to look at the line above me. It's the only book I do that to. All right. It is said that the fishes were sticklebacks, that they had fallen with ice and small frogs, many which had survived the fall. We note that in Dunfermline, 3 months later, October 7th, 1841, fell many fishes, several inches in length, in a thunderstorm. Hailstones we don't care so much about. The fact of stratification seems significant, but we think more of the fall of lumps of ice from the sky as possible data of the Super Sargasso Sea. Lumps of ice, a foot in circumference, Derbyshire, England, May 12, 1811. Cuboidal mass, 6 inches in diameter, that fell at Birmingham 26 days later. Size of pumpkins, Bangalore, India, May 22, 1851. Masses of ice of 1.5 pounds each. New Hampshire, August 13, 1851. Masses of ice, size of a man's head, in the Delphos tornado. Large as a man's hand, killing thousands of sheep. Texas, May 3, 1877. Pieces of ice so large that they could not be grasped in one hand in a tornado in Colorado, June 24th, 1877. Lumps of ice 4.5 inches long, Richmond, England, August 2nd, 1879. Mass of ice 21 inches in circumference that fell with hail, Iowa, June 1881. Pieces of ice 8 inches long and 1.5 inches thick, Davenport, Iowa, August 30th, 1882. Lump of ice the size of a brick, weight 2 pounds, Chicago, July 12th, 1883. Lumps of ice that weighed 1.5 pounds each, India, May, 1883. Lump of ice weighing 4 pounds, Texas, December 6, 1893. Lumps of ice 1 pound in weight, November 14, 1901, in a tornado, Victoria. Of course, it is our acceptance that these masses not only accompanied tornadoes, but were brought down to this earth by tornadoes. Flammarion, the atmosphere, page 34. Block of ice weighing 4.5 pounds that fell at Cazortora, Spain, June 15, 1829. Block of ice weighing 11 pounds at Seti, France, October 1844. Mass of ice 3 foot long, 3 feet wide, and more than 2 feet thick that fell in a storm in Hungary, May 8, 1802. Scientific America 47-119. That according to the Salina Journal, a mass of ice weighing about 80 pounds had fallen from the sky near Salina, Kansas, August 1882. We are told that Mr. W.J. Hagler, the North Santa Fe merchant, became possessor of it and packed it in sawdust in his store. London Times, April 7th, 1860. That upon the 16th of March, 1860, in a snowstorm in Upper Wasdale, blocks of ice so large that at distance they looked like a flock of sheep had fallen. Rep. Brit. Associate, 1851-32. That a mass of ice about a cubic yard in size had fallen at Kaddish, India, 1828. Against these data, though, so far as I know, so many of them have never been assembled together before, there is a silence upon the part of the scientific men that is unusual. Our Super Sargasso Sea may not be an unavoidable conclusion, but arrival upon this Earth of ice from external regions does not seem to be, except that there must be it ever so faint, a merger. It is in the notion that these masses of ice are only congealed hailstones. We have data against this notion as applied to all our instances, but the explanation has been offered, and it seems to me may apply in some instances. In the Bolsac Astro Deck of France 20-245, it is said of blocks of ice the size of decanters that had fallen at Tunis that they were only masses of congealed hailstones. London Times, August 4th, 1857, that a block of ice described as pure ice weighing 25 pounds had been found in the meadow of Mr. Warner of Cricklewood. There had been a storm the day before. As in some of our other instances, no one had seen this object fall from the sky. It was found after the storm. Nope. That's all that can be said about it. Letter from Captain Blackiston communicated by General Sabine to the Royal Society. That, January 14th, 1860, in a thunderstorm, pieces of ice had fallen upon Captain Blackiston's vessel. That it was not hail. It was not hail, but irregular shaped pieces of solid ice of different dimensions up to the size of half a brick. According to the Advertiser Scotsman, quoted by the Edinburgh New Philosophical Magazine, 47-371, an irregular shaped mass of ice fell at Ord, Scotland, August 1849, after an extraordinary peal of thunder. It is said that this was homogeneous ice except in a small part which looked like congealed hailstones. The mass was about 20 feet in circumference. The story is told in the London Times, August 14, 1849, is that upon the evening of the 13th of August, 1849, after a loud peal of thunder, a mass of ice said to have been 20 feet in circumference had fallen upon the estate of Mr. Moffat of Balvillich, Rossshire. It is said that this object fell alone or without hailstones. Altogether, though it is not so strong for the Super Sargasso Sea, I think this is one of our best expressions upon external origins. The large blocks of ice could form in the moisture of this Earth's atmosphere is about as likely as the blocks of stone could form in a dust whirl. Of course, if ice or water comes to this Earth from external sources, we think of at least minute organisms in it, and on with our data to frogs, fishes, on to anything that is thinkable coming from external sources. It's of great importance to us to accept that large lumps of ice have fallen from the sky, but what we desire most, perhaps because of our interest in its archaeologic and paleontologic treasures, is now to be through with tentativeness and probation. To take the Super Sargasso Sea into full acceptance in our more advanced fold of the chosen of this 20th century. In the report of the British Association, 1855-37, it is said that at Porbandar, India, December 11th, 1854, flat pieces of ice, many of them weighing several pounds each, I suppose, had fallen from the sky. They're described as large ice flakes, vast fields of ice in the superarctic regions or strata of the Super Sargasso Sea. When they break up, their fragments are flake-like. In our acceptance, there are aerial ice fields that are remote from this Earth that break up, fragments grinding against one another, rolling in vapor and water of different constituency in different regions, forming slowly as stratified hailstones. But that there are ice fields near this Earth that break up into just such flat pieces of ice as cover any pond or river when ice of a pond or river is broken, and are sometimes soon precipitated to the Earth in this familiar flat formation. Simon's Met Mag 43-154. A correspondent writes that at Braemar, July 2nd, 1908, with the sky was cleared overhead and the sun shining, flat pieces of ice fell from somewhere. The sun was shining, but something was going on somewhere. Thunder was heard. Till I saw the reproduction of the photograph in the Scientific American, February 21st, 1914, I had supposed that these ice fields must be, say, at least 10 or 20 miles away from this earth and invisible to terrestrial observers, except as the blurs that have so often been reported by astronomers and meteorologists. Photograph published by the Scientific American is of an aggregation supposed to be clouds, presumably not very high, so clearly detailed are they. The writer says that they look to him like a field of broken ice. Beneath is a picture of a conventional field of ice floating ordinarily in water. The resemblance between the two pictures is striking. Nevertheless, it seems to me incredible that the first of the photographs could be of an aerial ice field, or that gravitation could cease to act at only a mile or so from the Earth's surface. Unless the exceptional, the flux and vagary of all things, or that normally this Earth's gravitation extends, say, 10 or 15 miles outward, but that gravitation must be rhythmic. Of course, in the pseudo-formulas of astronomers, gravitation as a fixed quantity is essential, except that gravitation is a variable force, and astronomers deflate with a perceptible hissing sound into the punctured condition of economists, biologists, meteorologists, and all the others of the humbler divinities who can admittedly offer only insecure approximations. We refer all who would not like to hear this hiss of escaping arrogance to Herbert Spencer's chapters upon the rhythm of all phenomena. If everything else, light from the stars, heat from the sun, the winds and the tides, forms and colors and sizes of animals, demands and supplies and prices, political opinions and chemic reactions and religious doctrines and magnetic intensities and ticking of clocks and arrival and departure of the seasons, if everything else is variable, we accept that the notion of gravitation as fixed and formulable is only another attempted positivism, doomed, like all other illusions of realness in quasi-existence. So it is intermediatism to accept that, though gravitation may approximate higher in invariability than do the winds, for instance, it must be somewhere between the absolutes of stability and instability. Here, then, we are not much impressed with the opposition of physicists and astronomers, fearing a little mournfully that their language of expiring sibilations. So then the fields of ice in the sky, and that, though usually so far away as to be mere blurs, at times they come close enough to be seen in detail. For the description of what I call a blur, see Pop Sci News, February 1884-Sky. In general, unusually clear, but near the sun, a white, slightly curdled haze, which was dazzlingly bright. We accept that sometimes fields of ice pass between the sun and the earth, that many strata of ice or very thick fields of ice or superimposed fields would obscure the sun, that there have been occasions when the sun was eclipsed by fields of ice. Flammarion, The Atmosphere, page 394, that a profound darkness came upon the city of Brussels, June 18th, 1839. There fell flat pieces of ice an inch long. Intense darkness at Atkin, Minnesota, April 2nd, 1889. Sand and solid chunks of ice reported to have fallen. In Simmons Meteorological Magazine 32-192 are outlined rough-edged but smooth surface pieces of ice that fell at Manassas, Virginia, August 10th, 1897. They look as much like the roughly broken fragments of a smooth sheet of ice as ever have roughly broken fragments of smooth sheet of ice looked. About 2 inches across and 1 inch thick. In Cosmos 3-116, it is said that at Rowan, July 5th, 1853, fell irregular shaped pieces of ice about the size of a hand, described as looking as if all had been broken from one enormous block of ice. That, I think, was an aerial iceberg. In the awful density or almost absolute stupidity of the 19th century, it never occurred to anybody to look for traces of polar bears or of seals upon these fragments. Of course, seeing what we want to see, having been able to gather these data only because they are in agreement with notions formed in advance, we are not so respectful to our own notions as to a similar impression forced upon an observer who had no theory or acceptance to support. In general, our prejudices see and our prejudices investigate, but this should not be taken as an absolute. Monthly Weather Review, July 1894. That from the Weather Bureau of Portland, Oregon, a tornado of June 3rd, 1894 was reported. Fragments of ice fell from the sky. They averaged 3 or 4 inches square and about an inch thick. In length and breadth, they had the smooth surfaces required by our acceptance, and, according to the writer in the review, gave the impression of a vast field of ice suspended in the atmosphere and subtly broken in the fragments about the size of the palm of the hand. This datum, profoundly of what we used to call it the damned, or before we could no longer accept judgment or cut and dried condemnation by infants, turtles, and lambs, was copied, but without comment, in the Scientific American 71-371. Our theology is something like this. Of course, we ought to be damned, but we revolt against education by infants, turtles, and lambs. We now come to some remarkable data in a rather difficult department of supergeography. Vast fields of aerial ice. There's a lesson to me in the treachery of the imaginable. Most of our opposition is in the clearness with which the conventional but impossible becomes the imaginable, and then the resistant to modifications. After it had become the conventional with me, I conceived clearly of vast sheets of ice a few miles above this earth, then the shining of the sun and the ice partly melting. That note upon the ice that fell at Derby, water trickling and forming icicles upon the lower surface of the ice sheet. I seemed to look up and so clearly visualize those icicles hanging like stalactites from a flat-roofed cave in white calcite. Or I looked up at the underside of an aerial ice lump and seemed to see a papillation of similar to that observed by a calf at times. But then, if icicles should form upon the underside of a sheet of aerial ice, that would be by the falling of water towards this earth. An icicle is, of course, an expression of gravitation, and if water melting from ice should fall towards this earth, why not the ice itself fall before an icicle could have time to form? Of course, in quasi-existence, where everything is a paradox, one might argue that the water falls, but the ice does not, because the ice is heavier, that is, in masses. That notion, I think, belongs in a more advanced course than we are taking at present. Our expression upon icicles. Vast field of aerial ice. It is inert to this earth's gravitation by ununiversal flux and variation, but of it sags closer to this earth and is susceptible to gravitation by cohesion with the main mass. This part does not fall, but water melting from it does fall and forms icicles. Then, by various disturbances, this part sometimes falls in fragments that are protrusive with icicles. Of the ice that fell, some of it enclosing living frogs at Dubuque, Iowa, June 16th, 1882, it is said that there were pieces from 1 to 17 inches in circumference, the largest weighing 1 pound and 3/4, that upon some of them were icicles half an inch in length. We emphasize that these objects were not hailstones. The only merger is that of knobby hailstones or of large hailstones with protuberances wrought by crystallization, but that is no merger with terrestrial phenomena, and such formations are uncountable to orthodoxy, or it is incredible that hail could so crystallize, not forming by what is that word? Why do you do this to me? Not forming by accretion, accretion, in the fall of a few seconds. For an account of such hailstones, see Nature 61-594. Note the size. Some of them the size of turkey eggs. It is our expression that sometimes the icicles themselves have fallen as if by concussion or as if something had swept against the underside of an aerial ice floe, detaching its papillations. Monthly Weather Review, June 1889, that at Oswego, New York, June 11, 1889, according to the Turin, New York leader, there fell in a thunderstorm pieces of ice that resembled the fragments of icicles. Monthly Weather Review, 29-506, that in Florence Island, St. Lawrence River, August 8, 1901, with ordinary hail, fell pieces of ice formed like icicles the size and shape of lead pencils that had been cut into sections about 3/8 of an inch in length. So are data of the Super Sargasso Sea and its Arctic region, and for weeks at a time, an ice field may hang motionless over a part of this Earth's surface. The sun has some effect upon it, but not much until late in the afternoon. I should say part of it has sagged, but it is held up by cohesion with the main mass, whereupon we have such an occurrence as would have been a little uncanny to us once upon a time, or fall of water from a cloudless sky day after day in one small part of this Earth's surface, late in the afternoon when the sun's rays had time for their effects. Monthly Weather Review, October 1886, that according to the Charlotte Chronicle, October 21st, 1886, 3 weeks there had been a fall of water from the sky in Charlotte, North Carolina, localized in a particular spot every afternoon about 3 o'clock. That, whether the sky was cloudy or cloudless, the water or rain fell upon a small patch of land between 2 trees and nowhere else. This is the newspaper account, and as much, it seems, in the depths of the unchosen, either by me or any other expression of the Salvation Army. The account by the Signal Service Observer at Charlotte, published in the Review, follows. An unusual phenomenon was witnessed on the 21st, having been informed that, for some weeks prior to the date, rain had been falling daily after 3 p.m. on a particular spot near 2 trees, corner of 9th and D Streets. I visited the place and saw the precipitation in the form of raindrops at 4:47 and 4:55 p.m. while the sun was shining brightly. On the 22nd, I again visited the place, and from 4:05 to 4:25 p.m., a light shower of rain fell from a cloudless sky. Sometimes the precipitation falls over an area of a half an acre, but always appears to center at these 2 trees. And when lightest occurs there only. You see why this is a pain in the ass to read? It's all over the place. It's great. It's like a newspaper, but it's different. All right, fuck it. Got that chapter in the books.